I want to welcome everybody to another installment of What's Your Promise? And for those who've listened in the past, I always start out with a couple of ideas, maybe a couple of news items. And again, my name is Matthew Cossolotto, and sometimes I call myself the Make a Promise Coach. And it's all about the power of making a promise, this whole program, and I'm delighted to have a guest today. That's the whole idea with this program, is to bring a guest on to talk about their personal experience with the power of making a promise. And for just a little bit of background, I made a promise to my mother on her deathbed that I would finish writing a book that she and I had been talking about, and I would dedicate that book to her memory. And that was a very powerful thing to do, a very powerful promise I made. I knew when I made the promise that I had to follow through. And I did. I'm proud to say that the resulting book was called Habit Force, and it bears a dedication to my mother's memory. And some of you have listened, obviously you heard this story, but that got me into this whole topic of the power of making a promise. And what I realized after I made the promise and completed the book, and a little bit more recently, I realized that there's a power here that I want to share with other people. That it's now my mission to go out and let more and more people, millions of people hopefully, know about this power of making a promise that we all have within us to change our lives and to make the world a better place. And so I use the mantra, a 4-sentence mantra, and I always like to remind listeners about this simple mantra, just to remember the key points here. Make a promise, keep your word, change your life, transform the world. So those are the 4 sentences I always like to remind people, because that's the power that we're talking about here. And the transforming the world part comes about really one person and one promise at a time. And I think what's really fascinating is to hear stories about people who've made promises in their lives, and they've changed their lives and really improved the lives of other people in the process. And what I'm in the process of doing is collecting some of those stories and writing a book. And those of you, again, who've listened know that Jack Canfield, certainly famous for Chicken Soup for the Soul and the Success Principles and many other books, Jack Canfield has written the foreword to the book. I'm delighted to say that I actually have the foreword from Jack Canfield in my hands. It's been approved, so that's going to really, I think, catapult this whole book project to the next level as I look for publishers and try to get the thing out there to the world. So I want to thank Jack Canfield for doing that, for doing that forward. I talked to him about this project, and he liked it right away. It was like an immediate gut reaction, and I think that's the response I'm getting from a lot of people, including today's guest. I want to mention the name of Todd Newton. But Todd, you may know from lots of different TV shows, E! Entertainment, red carpet coverage of the Oscars, that kind of thing. A really talented TV host. And he also does the Price is Right, a live show in Vegas. I think he's been doing that for several years. He has a couple of new TV shows about game shows in other countries. It's really fun and exciting. And but he's also, something you may not know about Todd Newton, is that he's also a life coach. And he has a lot of programs that help people. I think there's one series of programs he calls A Better You. So if you're interested in, and I want to give a website, toddnewtonlive.com. So without any further delay, let me welcome in Todd Newton. And I'm going to ask the question, Todd, what's your promise? That's the question.
Well, Matthew, thank you very much for for having me here, and what a great mission you're on, by the way, my friend. And I know that when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, I was very clear on the fact of how impressed I am, along with Jack Canfield, of what you're doing here. And I also mentioned to you, Matthew, that promise is one of the strongest words in my personal vocabulary. My children, who are 9 and 5 right now, understand what it means to make a promise, and more importantly, what it means to keep a promise. So the fact that you're spreading the power of that word and the meaning of that word is a beautiful thing. So congratulations on that.
Well, I appreciate that. And what's really interesting, but you mentioned it with your kids, and that was a great story. What were the 4 things? I think you told me about 4 things that you talked to them about, and the promise is one of them.
Yeah, well, I teach them the power and the importance of promise, of respecting your fellow man, of having integrity, and of dreaming. I think that a life without respect, without commitment or promise, without integrity or self-respect, self-esteem, and a life without dreams is a life wasted. And I think that when we have the pleasure of and the honor of parenting a child and instilling these beliefs within them, it really is a gift. And it's a great responsibility. So, but one of the things, Matthew, that I love about a promise and about a commitment of any kind is it's twofold. Actually, it gives us, number one, the ability to have something to work for. It gives us accountability. And when I am coaching someone or speaking at one of my seminars, I believe that accountability is one of the most important things you can throw out there, because it really puts someone to work. It increases their focus. It increases the intensity of the discussion, of the mission, of the strategy, whatever it may be. So you got to be accountable. And when we make a promise to somebody, whether it was the promise that I made that I'm going to share with you momentarily, or the promise that you made to your mother, instantly you became accountable to finish that book. And when we hold ourselves accountable, or when other people are holding us accountable, I believe it makes the prize, the reward, the outcome all the more glorifying. So that's number one. And number two, a promise shows how much we care. It shows how much something means to us. It shows how much we love someone. It shows how much we believe in a goal or a dream. So we, in turn, get a lot of reward from that, because we're expressing the importance. And I think that's really key to remember here. You're giving someone accountability, and it makes us feel good knowing that there's something that we care enough about to say, I promise you, and that's one of the biggest factors for me. Well, let me tell you about the promise or promises that I've made in my life that mean the most to me. And keep in mind, I believe that people will make hundreds, if not thousands, of promises throughout a lifetime. We promise to love, honor, and obey a spouse. We promise to you put the check in the mail today. We promise to drive a little slower after we get a ticket. These are all the very the very popular promises. But I also believe that there are the special promises that we make. Right. And these are the promises that we make to those people in our lives that no matter what comes our way, we will never back down. That being said, the most important person in my life when I was growing up was my grandmother, Nana. And I have mentioned Nana in countless interviews over the years as an influence on me personally as well as professionally. My grandmother was a comedian during World War II, a very, very funny, charismatic, amazingly delightful woman. And she...
Now you're saying Nana, like N-E-N-A?
Yeah, N-A-N-A is what I called her.
N-A-N-A, okay. N-A-N-A, gotcha.
And, if you could just picture this wonderful woman with an infectious smile who always had a hug for you, who always had just the right word of encouragement and support and love. And that was my Nana. And when Nana passed away in the mid-'90s, I remember I was on the radio in St. Louis at the time, and she would always encourage me. She would never push me. She would tell me to find something that I loved doing and do it. And she would tell me that happiness would come, and that was just the goal, to just be happy with your life. Right. And when Nana passed away, I remember being in her hospital room, and I was leaning over her hospital bed. I was leaning over her. She was in her bed, and she was fading fast. And I could tell by the way she was looking at me that we were still connected. And she was understanding that everything that I was saying was coming from my heart, and she was hearing it. And I was telling her and thanking her for being this incredible figure in my life. And I remember she said, "Oh, T." She called me T. She said, "Oh, yeah. T," as if to say I didn't do anything, but obviously she had. And as she was laying there, and I was well aware of the fact that this would be the last conversation that I would have with her, I promised her something that on paper would look to be very generic, but in my heart was incredibly complex and detailed. I promised her that I would always make her proud of me. And what that means, what it meant to me at that moment was, I'm sorry, I get very emotional when I speak about that.
Well, listen, that's where this comes from, is the heart. So listen.
Right. But you're right. And what that meant when I said those words to Nana, and they were very raw and spontaneous. I hadn't thought about them prior to walking in the room. They came right from the heart, as you just said, Matthew. I meant by that promise that I would always live a life that benefited other people, that, like you have said, helped make the world a better place by providing smiles and laughs and entertainment and inspiration. And I will tell you that in the 17, 18 years since Nana has passed, I feel I've done a pretty good job of living up to that. And I'm not a perfect human being by any means. I make mistakes. Yeah. I fall short of my own expectations from time to time, and of the expectations that others have of me. And the reason that happens is because I'm human. And I accept that. But I am able to realize that every day is a new day. And every day we have the opportunity to help someone else. And as my career grew and I was able to reach broader audiences, I shifted what I wanted to be as a television host. I did, as you mentioned, all of the red carpet interviews for so many award shows where I had the great pleasure of interviewing everyone. It's funny, people always say, "Did you ever interview so-and-so?" And I don't think I've ever said no. And then I fell in love with the game show genre. And I realized why game shows have been so successful for so long. It's because people love seeing other people have this joy. We live vicariously through these people, and therefore I'm spreading the joy that Nana spread to literally millions of households, and it's a great pleasure. I mean, it's such an honor. And
she would be proud. That's your promise.
She would.
She would be very proud.
She sure would. And, I'll tell you, Matthew, and I don't think I have ever said this publicly I don't even know if I've said it privately, quite frankly, but before
that's what I
go
love. I want to bring out something new here.
Before I go on stage, whether it's in Las Vegas, whether it's to speak at one of my motivational seminars, whether it's to walk on camera for a game show, there is a moment where someone is doing an introduction, and I'm standing either behind a curtain or off to the side of the stage, and I will always close my eyes and picture Nena. And she used to, as I was leaving her house as a child, she used to pat me on the back with her right hand, my lower back. And her hands were very arthritic. And I can put myself, I'm a big believer in neuro-linguistic programming, so I can put myself in a state instantly.
Right.
I put myself in that state, and I can feel her hand on my back patting me, as if to say, go do your thing. Mm-hmm. And it's not, I don't feel her whole hand, I just feel her fingertips because, she was arthritic, and it was the very same feeling. And so every time I do anything or I have the opportunity to make good on that promise, I feel Nena with me right there. So,
and that sort of transports you, I would think, into this very confident, serene mindset that you can achieve and accomplish what you're about to do.
You're right.
That's one of the things that I talk about, and I know you do presentation skills training as well, Todd, and I do that as well. I also call myself the Podium Pro, and one of the things I talk about is the joy. You mentioned spreading joy, and I'll just mention this real briefly, but the joy of speaking. And I encourage people, because there is some fear of public speaking, as you know. A lot of people have this. And the joy of speaking, one of the things I recommend, almost exactly what you just said, before you go on stage, close your eyes and transport yourself into a very calming, I call it a speaking sanctuary. And that's what your Nena is to you, is your speaking sanctuary before you get up and perform or speak. And that's, I just really respond very, very positively to what you just said, because it is so important to get yourself into that frame of mind. But a little digression. But yes, so Nena is with you when you perform.
She certainly is. And it's just, it's a great gift to be able to have the opportunity to make good on that promise. And that has caused me to just strive to be the best man, the best father, the best friend, the best whatever role I may need to fill. It has caused me to be the best, to strive, rather, to be the best in every category. And that is why that promise is one of the most important things I have ever done, ever said, and ever will commit to. That promise to my Nena, because it has really, literally changed my life for the better.
And it stays with you. And this is one of the things that a promise, you mentioned smaller promises, and promises do come in all shapes and sizes. Some are small, some are big, some are to people we really care about. Some people make promises to God. In the case of Jack Canfield, I won't get into his promise, because I want to keep that in abeyance for a while, but the promise he made was to God. Some other people I've talked with in these interviews make promises to themselves, to God, to someone they care about. But in every instance, this promise has staying power, and it helps to keep people on track over time. You're talking 17, 18 years. I'm talking, my promise was about 10 years to my mother. And now it's probably the rest of my life here with launching Make a Promise Day, a new book. I don't know. This is never going to end with me. And, spreading the good news about the making of a promise.
Well,
because
I will tell you,
that is a life.
I think what you're doing is fantastic, and I can't thank you enough for reaching out to me and allowing me to be a part of this, and I look forward to supporting your Make a Promise Day in May and being a part of this great campaign as it grows and grows and grows. And I would just like to say to everyone who's listening, please make a promise to someone who's special to you today, and tell them that you'll always be there for them, and tell them that they're spectacular. Tell them that you love them. Tell them that they're wonderful, and just tell them that you promise to always be the person that they need you to be.